Welcome back. The next topic is pretty fun. How to invent light. Let's tease this apart. If we want the power to invent light, we need to be able to solve lighting problems. To solve these problems, we need a way to understand any light situation. I found a tool that helps me do this. I call it the Light Guide because it shows me the way when I'm lost with my shading. I can use it to analyze and understand any light situation that I might encounter. So what is it? It's a drawing of a little sphere, a little ball. This ball represents the object I'm drawing, taking into consideration the environment that the object is in. A good light guide shows the shading of a specific material in a specific environment. I'm borrowing the concept from visual effects in film. When you see an image like this, on the set it actually looks a lot different. As you see, many elements have to be combined to create a cohesive final image. It's actually quite difficult to do this. To make it possible, visual effects specialists capture so-called light probes to record information on the lighting in a scene. This is then passed on to computers to create believable images. We can apply this to drawing and painting. Let's begin by drawing a light guide. You need a pencil and an eraser, and a piece of paper or something to draw on. I will do a little light guide first, quickly, to show you what I would do next to a drawing I'm working on. Then I'll walk you through the steps of building a light guide. I want you to see the size of this drawing. I keep these small. The main job of the light guide is to show me the light direction. Sometimes I draw a little arrow and an indication for the light source. But you don't really need those. All the lighting information is encoded in the light guide itself. Alright, to really understand what I did here, we have to look at the anatomy of an ellipse. An ellipse has a major axis and a minor axis. The long one is called the major axis. And the short one is the minor axis. This may seem boring, but this is what gives you the power to control your light direction on your light guide. It's super important. So let me start again with a circle. Every light guide begins with a circle. And then the major axis. So the major axis of the ellipse of the terminator. That's what I'm adding. Then the minor axis, and I extend the line of the minor axis because this line always points towards the light source. If you know the direction of the minor axis, you know the light direction. Next is to draw the actual ellipse of the terminator. And keep in mind, this is a three-dimensional idea. This is an edge loop, a rubber band that goes around the form. So always draw the terminator with this idea in mind. Alright, let's do it again, start to finish. Circle, major axis, light direction, which is at a right angle, terminator ellipse, and then I'm going to clean up the light side of my light guide to prepare for toning in of the shadow side. I'm speeding this up for your convenience. Also, I'd like to point out that the light guide is not meant to be a very refined drawing. It's a little tool, and its only purpose is to show you the light direction. It's a sort of problem-solving sketch. So, that's how you build a light guide. Let's have some fun with this. You can join me now if you haven't already. We'll do 3 different light directions. So draw a circle, then the major axis, which is at a right angle to the light direction. Okay. And then the terminator ellipse. And filling the shadows again. And cleaning up the lights. Alright, let's do another one. I will place the major axis at the same angle, which means the light direction is still coming from the top left. But now I'm going to play with the terminator ellipse and make it much more open. Looking at this new ellipse, you can see that the distance from the ellipse to the major axis is much bigger here than on that first ellipse I've drawn. Do you see that? So this means that in the first drawing, the light source is further away from us than in the second drawing. By changing how big or open the terminator ellipse is in the second drawing, I've actually moved the light source closer to us. So now we have a bigger form light and a smaller form shadow. Hang in there while I shade. And then we're going to draw arrows for the light directions. Not only are we going to draw arrows, but we'll draw them in perspective. There's an ellipse right there at the tip of the arrow. And I can simply draw the same ellipse that I drew on the light guide below. See, it's a pretty open ellipse. I use these arrows to make sure I understand the light direction. Now, let's do the other one. The light direction is much more shallow here, so the ellipse I draw for the arrow, again, is the same ellipse that I use on the terminator below. And at the end of the arrow, there's that same ellipse again. Let's do a third light guide. Whoops, sometimes they go wonky. No problem, we'll just try it again. There are no mistakes, only happy accidents, right? Major axis and the light direction. And this time I'm going to push the light away from us. So we will have a lot of shadow on this light guide. A little bit of cleanup. Sometimes it's faster to go a little bit too far with the shadow and then cut into it with the eraser. Okay, now for the arrow. See the ellipse on the sphere? I'm drawing the same ellipse. We're looking up at the arrow, or the arrow is pointing at us. So we've drawn all the light guides with the light coming from the left. What if we want the light to come from the right? Very easy. Draw the light direction, then draw the major axis at a right angle to the light direction. Then draw the terminator ellipse. You can choose how open or closed you want that ellipse to be. Shade it in. And there you go. Clean up the form light and then draw the arrow. Beautiful. You now know how to create a light guide. There's one more thing I want to point out, since we're drawing so many ellipses. Here's the ellipse and the major axis. A lot of beginners draw an ellipse like this. They do one half and then the other half. I cringe seeing this. The sharp corner is what creates a fish. See, you can add a fin here and the fin here, and you've got a fish. And this is a sad fish because it was hoping to be an ellipse. So I use a trick to avoid this, and that is to begin drawing the ellipse a little before the bend, before the curve. So for the light guide, draw a circle, major axis, and then draw the ellipse a little bit before. I hope you can see what I'm doing there. This also really helps my brain to remember that this is round, that there is volume involved here. One final shading. And there you have it. You now know how to make a light guide using the major axis and the minor axis of the Terminator ellipse. And avoiding any fish along the way. Let's do some more hands-on practice. I designed the following exercises as a mental framework that you can absorb quickly. My goal is that you develop an intuitive sense for analyzing light directions. This allows you to make accurate shading decisions fluidly and with confidence as you draw. Here's the setup. We have a sphere, a light, and a camera. We're going to look at the sphere through this camera. Now keep an eye on the camera view as I move the light around the sphere. Right, front, left, and back. Let's move the light to our left. In this light direction, the Terminator ellipse is right in the middle of the form. From the camera view, it looks like a straight line, but in the perspective view, you can see that the Terminator is an ellipse. The light side is on the left, the shadow side is on the right. Now I have a question for you. Let me turn off the camera first. If we move the light 45 degrees to the front, where is the Terminator? Take a piece of paper and draw a simple light guide showing the Terminator line. This isn't as easy as it looks. I've picked these mini assignments very carefully. It's not enough to just imagine it. Please trust me on this and do an actual drawing now. Press pause and make a quick drawing. Then press play again to reveal the solution. And go. Okay, revealing the solution in 3, 2, 1. Here it is. How close did you get? When I did this for the first time, I made the shadow much too big. I expected it to be around here, close to the middle, but that's not correct. It turns out, in this light direction, the Terminator is much more to the side, revealing more light than you might think. Okay, let's move the light back to the left and turn off the camera view. And let's move the light back this time, again by 45 degrees. Now this could be easy, or maybe not. Draw another circle with a Terminator ellipse. And press pause while you draw. Are you ready? Here's the solution. So yes, this is the same as before, but now we're looking at the shadow side. It's the opposite of the last image. If we rotate the light all the way back, we only see shadow. In this case, the Terminator is the same as the contour. And of course, all the way from the front, it's the same thing. The Terminator is the same as the contour. Okay, you've completed the basic practice. Well done. The better you get at this, the more freedom you have. Freedom, for example, to invent light on a portrait. I would like to show you how to shade a portrait in 2 different light directions. From imagination. Let's do it. I'm going to paint in Photoshop because I can show you my thought process by separating concepts into different layers. Speaking of layers, I only have a background layer here, so let's begin with a new layer for the line drawing. You'll see the whole process, starting from 0. This is not a Photoshop tutorial, but I'll try to point out a few things in my workflow. I'm keeping the design simple, so I can block in the shading in a way that's easy to understand. I would definitely recommend that you try this for yourself, either digitally or with traditional media. But I suggest that you watch this first to get a better idea of both the steps and what to look out for. So we have the lines. Now I'm going to make another layer and fill the silhouette of the head with a flat color. I'll call this layer tones, so we have a layer called lines that is on top and a layer called tones that's on the bottom. I really enjoy planning out my brushstrokes as I work. Sometimes it's more effective to paint over an edge and erase back in than trying to carefully match the shape. So at the bottom of the neck, I went too far, and then I go in with the eraser and cut away the excess amount to clean it up that way. Or here in the ear, I painted over a bit too much at the top of the ear, then I erase into the head, switch to a brush, and create a clean contour of the head with a brushstroke going up. A little bit more cleanup. Okay, I think this should be enough. Now I'm going to set the blending mode of the line layer to multiply so that the lines are always on top and visible. The missing piece now is the light guide. Make this a habit. Whenever you shade something, whenever your mind switches to shading mind, create a light guide. If you do this for a few months, it's going to be really transformative for your drawing and painting. Whether it's working from imagination or from observation, this will help you. I'm making a round selection for the light guide, filling it with the same tone as the head, and turning on lock transparency, so I don't have to worry about accidentally painting outside of the circle. Now, I want to make a comment about values. How do you choose the right values or tones? First, it's helpful to understand the concept of local value, the general lightness or darkness of a material. With this in mind, I follow a great method I learned from a fantastic artist and teacher, Scott Robertson. The method is called halfway to black. Here's how it works. You choose a light value, let's say this. You can choose any light value you want. Then you look at the color picker and consider the value scale from white to black. Your light value is up here. The way you find your shadow value is to go halfway to black. That would be around here. Does that make sense? You start by choosing a light value, and then you find the distance between that light value and black. You simply go to the middle of that distance. This is your shadow value. Keep in mind that this is an initial approximation. If you want to refine your value choice, you would adjust the shadow value to be lighter or darker depending on how strong the ambient light is. But that's a bit more advanced. In most cases, halfway to black gives you a great starting point. We can also go in the opposite direction. If we start with a shadow value, let's pick something pretty dark, we have a distance from black to this shadow value. It's a short distance now. To find the light value, I know that I have to go up the same short distance. So the light value is about here. This will be a very dark material, maybe something like black leather. The darker a material is, or in other words, the darker the local value of a material, the closer together the values for form light and form shadow are. It's hard to see the difference between the tones here because the background is so light. So let's do a lighter material, maybe something like this. Again, going halfway to black, this is where the shadow would be. Let's add the light. And then the shadow. There we go. Let's see how this compares to what we already have on the head. We can pick any value combination as long as this halfway to black relationship makes sense. I'd like to have the shadow a little darker, so we have more contrast with the background. So let's fill the light guide again, and then the head. Okay, so we have the shadow value. This is the distance from black to the shadow, and then going the same distance up, here is the light value. Now here's the fun part. The light guide is where you design the light direction. You can literally do anything you want. So we can make the light come from the left. We can push the light back, so it's more like a rim light, or we can have the light direction come from the top right. Having watched this video so far, I hope you understand how I estimate the Terminator ellipse. To make the light guide, I really just place form light, form shadow, make sure the Terminator ellipse works, then add the dark halftones. And if you want, you can add some reflected light. Here we go. Alright, I'm going to double this whole setup because I want to do two different light directions on the same head. So hang in there while I do some layer management. I also get easily confused with my layers, so I like to keep the layer names organized. Okay, set the line layer back to multiply so they show up again. And I still have lock transparency turned on so I can paint without thinking about going outside of the shapes that I already established. Now, let me choose a different light direction here. I'm thinking that something from the bottom could be good. And maybe a light direction that's less frontal, more from the side or from behind the head, so we get a bit more shadow. Something like this. And some reflected light. Wow, see how much rounder the light guide felt after I added the reflected light? Important here, always keep the reflected light more subtle than your main light source. Alright, let's get into it. At first, I'm really treating the whole head like a kind of balloon, a big shape. So I look at the light guide and I estimate what would be in light and what would be in shadow. Here I'm looking at the direction of the cast shadow of the jaw falling onto the neck. Remember, if you look at the Terminator ellipse on the light guide, at the right angle to the ellipse is the light direction. That's also the direction in which cast shadows are projected. So I can look through the head and see what other places have cast shadows. I do this in my mind usually, but I'll draw it out for you here. I'm looking through the object and estimating where the cast shadows are, which direction they would fall in, and how far they would go. And with all of this, you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get it close enough so it's believable to the viewer. From there, I put in the remaining shadow shapes. there would probably be some shadow in the eye sockets. Under the nose, I'm just roughly estimating. We can refine this later. Maybe in the corners of the mouth, and inside the ear and under the ear in the earlobe. Okay, so we've laid the foundation now. This is the important part. The rest is going to be much easier. I'm going to add more halftones and some reflected light. Something I want to emphasize here is that I try my best to resist the temptation to go lighter in my halftones. Let's say this is my light value. It's very tempting to go a little lighter in order to get a stronger sense of light. Don't do it. If I go lighter, I will break the halfway to black relationship. If I make my lights lighter, I would also have to make my shadows lighter. Now, if you understand ambient light, you can do this, but to keep things simple, this is my limit. I can't go any lighter than this, but I can go darker. I can add a few darker halftones, and that's really going to help me get a better sense of form. I'll make a comment about Photoshop technique here, because I see a lot of people wasting time. If I pick an actual halftone value, like this one, and I paint into the shadows like so, you can see that I'm making the shadows lighter. I don't want to do that. I want to protect the shadows, to keep everything organized. Otherwise, I'll get confused and frustrated. So what I do instead, in terms of technique, is to pick the shadow value with the color picker and then paint with very low pressure. This way, I'm not affecting the shadow value at all. I'm not going darker than what is shadow. I'm making a nice connection between light and shadow, and I'm adding some dark halftones. When you work like this, painting really becomes like sculpting. And I don't know about you, but for me this is just so much fun. Okay, a little bit of halftone on the cheek, and there would probably be some light on the lower lip. And some shadow on the upper lip. And yeah, obviously, this is all very simple. I'm just showing the main volumes of this head. And it's not geometrically, physically accurate. If we made a 3D model of this, it would probably look quite a bit different. But that's okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be right enough, so nothing stands out as looking wrong or being distracting. Here comes the reflected light. I'll keep it pretty subtle. And with this, the big forms are described now, and I could stop here. If I have done my work, your brain can understand this head. I'll add a few of the smaller forms, just to develop the drawing a little bit further, but I think we're almost there. What else? There's going to be a little bit of halftone in that space that connects the forehead to the nose. This is called the glabella. And I think that's good. All right, let's paint the second head. I'm going to start with the center light, that area of the object that is facing most directly towards the light source. Then I will move outwards from there. My goal is to define the terminator. And I'll say it again, I'm estimating. If you're really lost, you can build a little maquette, which is a small sculpture, and see how it reacts to light in the real world. Or just draw more from life in general, to sort of build a mental database of how different forms look in different types of lighting. Now, with that said, I'm noticing that on the lower lip, I'm not committing to putting this area either into light or into shadow. That's just lazy painting. When I catch myself doing this, I try to stop and think. It's hard, but a good way to do it is to draw a side view and a top view, then indicate the light direction in each view. That usually helps me be more confident. Okay, we can't do much more in the form light, but what we can do is add occlusion shadows. I have a video on YouTube that is just about ambient occlusion. It's really one of the most underused and undertaught skills in drawing. Ambient occlusion is extremely important for creating form in objects that are mostly in shadow, like this head. If you don't understand occlusion, good luck, you're not going to be able to create something convincing and realistic. You have to be fairly subtle to make occlusion shadows work. And for me, the more methodical I can be, the better the results tend to be. In terms of technique, masks are very helpful, as is thinking in terms of gradients, where you create a gradual transition, beginning with the darkest part of the occlusion shadow and gradually fading out the effect with a soft brush. That line of the nose is bothering me, so I'll erase it partly with a layer mask. And that's better. It looks much more real now, because the tone of the line didn't make sense in that place. Our brains know when something isn't right. The difference between you as a painter and someone who just enjoys looking at art is that you have to know why something doesn't work and what to do to change it so that it does work. Here I'm adding some occlusion shadow where the lips come together to help me feel the masses of the upper lip and the lower lip and to explain that form change. If you want to be good at shading, learn as much as possible about ambient occlusion. It will really help develop your sense of sculptural drawing. And finally, I will add a little bit of reflected light from the top right. That made a big difference. I'll add a bit of reflected light on the ear. Don't skip anything, it's all part of the same object. And the reflected light on the cranium is probably a bit too strong. I feel that it's competing a little bit with the main light source, so I'll tone it down slightly. So here we are, the same head in two different light situations, completely from imagination. I hope that you can see the power of the light guide. I used it here as a tool to guide my shading. And obviously, I have some practice. I've been teaching this for many years now, and I've been drawing from life a lot. And from imagination, not quite as much, but a fair amount as well. So if your first attempt doesn't look like this, please be patient. Keep practicing and finding the joy in exploring this. It's so fun. We can sculpt with light. It's amazing. Once you have the understanding of this skill, the only limitation there is, really, is what you can dream up. Let's do the two final exercises. Here is a head. Do you think you could draw a light guide for it? This one is pretty straightforward. Press pause and start drawing. Okay, 5 seconds to go. Press pause if you're not ready. Okay, here it is. So the light is just coming straight from the right. Easy. Round 2. Where's the light coming from now? Press pause and go. And revealing. Alright, so the light is coming straight from the top. This was the warm-up. Let's make it a bit more challenging. Draw a light guide for this light direction. And I'll give you a hint. The light is coming either slightly from behind the head or slightly from the front. Which one is it? Think carefully. Five seconds to go. And let's take a look. How did it go? Let me do an analysis. We can tell that the light must be coming from behind the person because there's no light anywhere on the front of the face. The forehead, the cheeks, the nose, those places usually catch some light even if the light is coming straight from the top. But here they're all in shadow. Maybe you were also able to see that there's an overall tilt to the Terminator. That's the angle of the major axis, which shows you the left or right tilt of the light direction. Alright, now let's mix it up a bit. Let's do it the other way around. I give you the light guide, and you are drawing the head. You can totally do this. Just draw a stick figure head if you have to. Keep it simple. There's no need to make a refined rendering. Just estimate roughly what falls into light and what falls into shadow. Of course, if you have a lot of experience, I challenge you to get it as right as possible. Press pause and make a little sketch. I'm revealing in 3, 2, and here's the solution. This is the downside of teaching online. I would love to see your drawing. This is a difficult task. If you got anywhere near the solution that the 3D render gives you, you have my respect. And I hope you feel like you're learning and getting better at this. If you didn't do this last one, just go back and try it. I promise you will learn something that you will take with you into all your future drawings. Not just portrait drawings, but any drawing. So, do it! I feel like Tony freaking Robbins, but hey, this is about you getting better at your craft. And encouraging you is what I can do from over here. Alright, and with that, we're going to close this guide. But there's something I want to leave you with. When we started, I mentioned the master key. The master key is practice. Here are 3 things you can practice. The first is to draw a still life of an egg from life. We've already dipped our toes into this one today, but do one in a new medium. Maybe pencil, charcoal, oil paint, or digital. Pick one. You're really going to improve. Make it the most realistic, most refined drawing that you've ever done. This is the first assignment, and it's a challenge. If you use social media, you can add the hashtag, and we can all see each other's drawings. The second challenge is to create a light guide for a current piece you're working on. That's very simple. You can do that right now. And make it a habit while you're at it. The third challenge is what I call a relighting study. Pick one of your works and invent a new light direction. Draw the same object again, but in a different light. And with that, my dear fellow traveler, I'm signing off. If you enjoyed this guide, please tell your friends about it. They will appreciate it, and so do I. I hope we'll get to meet in person one day, and I wish you all the best on your journey in art and life.